I want to welcome you all to another edition of our virtual counselor coffee. So today we have Ms. Kaplan and Mr. Claiborne with us, as always, and then we also have Alex Stowe, who is joining us from Gettysburg College. We're going to be talking today about one of the issues that I think a lot of our families are really, and students are struggling with and having questions about, which is, okay, I'm in the middle of this pandemic. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go to college and what that is going to be like. I have all of this information about finding my fit and what my fit could or should be. And yet I can't go to a college. I can't have that aha, welcome, this is the place for me moment. And so we're trying to determine that fit based on, what we can see on a website or a virtual tour or how a college talks to itself. And so a big focus of today's conversation is going to be, um, you know, how to decipher some of those messages that we'll get from colleges, right? Like what are they saying about themselves? How can I then project myself forward? And what are some of those programs at a college that maybe they're discussing or talking about, but we don't really grasp the whole sense of that until we kind of like really dive down deep into what it is. So first of all, Alex, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
And I think one of the things I want to start with is, we've got a lot of high school boys here, and sometimes high school boys are big fans of shorthand and trying to say, okay, I know what a place is because I know a couple key buzzwords about it or one or two things. And I think one of those phrases that our students hear the most often and probably act like they know the most about, but maybe understand the least, is the phrase small liberal arts college. And Gettysburg fits that bill. When we're defining what that is, I think they understand what a state school is. They understand maybe what a Catholic school is because they're coming from a Catholic school. Define small liberal arts college for me as someone who's representing Gettysburg.
So, small liberal arts college, I start with, what are you getting for a degree? I think that's most important. That you need to start with an understanding of what is the actual degree, right? So at a place like Gettysburg College, you are getting a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Sciences, or if you're in the conservatory, Bachelor of Music. That's it. You're not getting, when you talk about these degrees, it's not a professional degree. And so I think starting there, because immediately in the world, everyone knows one of the first things a college is going to also talk about: what percentage of students have internships, what percentage are employed or in graduate school within a year, and give you a list of outcomes. So it's helping you say, okay, this is the degree I'm getting, these are the outcomes, so how am I getting there? And by understanding, when you're talking about this system, it is still a complete educational system. And that, the joke I always make, if you're not great at math, we're not going to make you take calculus. And in fact, the students who study business joke that if you are a business, majoring in business organizations and management, and you take a class with an MAT prefix to satisfy a requirement, you screwed up, because there's enough business and econ classes that have a mathematical foundation that are helping you towards a major and meeting those requirements. But the idea is that the world is beyond just one thing, right? And we're talking about adaptability. And so when you have a bachelor's degree, a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Sciences, that goes into, not giving away the punchline or anything, but that goes to the idea of, how am I going to leave college and not just say, well, I studied history, how do I do history? It helps you see, we're emphasizing the value of being an effective communicator, being a critical thinker, having that integrated thinking. It's Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. All of our students, one of our objectives is that they leave Gettysburg College being an informed citizen. So those sort of goals, because we see those are things that make students successful in the long run, in addition to all the classes that say, well, I want this job, so I need these classes. It's that whole system working together.
I think that's you're a pro. That's the way that we should think about it. And so as, for the students and families who are listening, it's, the big process that they're involved right now is this discernment process where it's not necessarily what do I want to do, but how do I learn? How do I become who I want to be? And in some cases, it's like, I want to do business, but like you were saying, I'm not great at calculus. Does that mean that I can't follow my dream? It's like, no, we're just going to study this in a different way. And uh, I don't know how I didn't open with this, like, amazing hat, by the way. Like, I appreciate
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
I definitely, underneath this hat, I definitely have a Rona buzz cut. And I have not given myself a buzz cut since I was firefighting. And that is painfully now longer ago than I like to remember. So I'm hoping to see my wife this weekend, and I might sweet talk her and kind of get, I'm like, bad hair day. Like always jokes about me with my Civil War hat. So it's like, it's fitting.
It is, but it's beautiful. And I think, as we're, so like to pull it back to this concept of fit, the, Gettysburg is a place of tremendous fit. And you seem to be someone who enjoys it. We have Civil War garb on. When we think about the concept of joy, and something that our juniors are talking about right now, and we push them to identify something that brings them joy and something that they care about. So once a student identifies those things that bring them joy, how could they match that then to a college? Like, joy is such an intangible thing, but what aspects, how can colleges demonstrate that joy feeling?
So, I mean, this is something that I learned in my college years. It's, looking at a place and realizing that there is joy in a vocation and there's joy in an avocation. And so when you're looking at a school, it can be a conversation of, is this a community that has things, right? The famous clubs and teams, discussion, right? Because one of the things that we talk about, and I feel a lot more people are talking about, is mental health and well-being and physical well-being going hand in hand. In this day and age, most colleges you look for, they have a counseling office. They have all sorts of different offices that are meant to address a student's mental well-being. But what about that physical well-being? And so I think that's one of those pieces that, especially coming from yours, I know when I think it was like an English class.
Oh yeah, yeah,
talked to.
yeah.
One of the things I talked about, in my skinnier days at Syracuse, I was a rower. And absolutely, that took up a huge amount of time. It has nothing to do, in many ways, nothing to do with my occupation now. But like, it kept me focused, and it gave me a schedule. It was, helped me maintain grades and so on and so forth. So looking at a place and looking at, like, what am I going to do there? I think that's a big part of joy. One of the things, anyone who interacts with Gettysburg is, a student, me now will fall in the same trope. We talk about food. We've gotten, in the world of college rankings, it's one of the areas that we're perennially highly ranked is campus food. And it seems silly, and it really is. But at the same time, like all these social events, we ended up doing, we always do this thing called Wingo. It's bingo with chicken wings. And so we're like, all right, we're going to do virtual Wingo. And I almost said cafeteria. Man, I'm screwed up this morning. Our dining hall is famous at the lunch hour for handmade cookies. It's a thing. Come to Gettysburg. Your tour guide will take you in. They'll get you the handmade cookies. So we're like, we can't do wings, but we'll ship you all cookies, and we'll do like Zoom bingo for anyone who wants to. And the prizes are the same. And we just, some kid got shipped a stupidly huge flat screen TV. So, but it's one of these things that, okay, I know the academic rigor and prestige of a place, whether it's from doing all this investigation, like that's the due diligence of college and the college search process, right? I know the academic prestige, but like, what am I doing to maintain, bluntly, my sanity outside of the hours that I'm sitting in a classroom?
And I think that's probably one of the aspects that students might feel like they're missing right now of, okay, hey, I can't see that dining hall where the tradition happens, or I can't see the
Mhm.
place where this club meets. And in those situations, we're using SCORE right now, and for students and families who are on, I would really encourage you on each school's landing page. They have a lot of student-driven content that shows those clubs in action, and they show those meeting places, and they show those dining halls. And again, it's created by students who are doing something that they love and they're passionate about, and they chose to share it on their own instead of a college putting together a view book, where you might be able to get a little bit more of an authentic or a sincere feeling about some of those aspects. So we never want to just be checking the box and say, okay, well, do they have intramural sports? Just about everyone's going to have intramural sports, but is it a culture where people are actively participating in those sports, or is it something that they have and there's 8 people who play them and nobody else is ever on the team? So I think that's a very thoughtful way of thinking about vocation and avocation, and it sends us towards perhaps one of the easier things to think about or research at this time is that concept of vocation and the concept of what am I good at, and how do I then do that at the next level. And so you sort of have the classic, well, I'm good at social studies, or I'm good at English, but I don't want to major in English, or I don't want to major in social studies. um, how When someone figures out what they're good at, how can they then turn that into a profession or a way of life beyond just saying like English student, English teacher?
I think it goes back to the system, right? And helping students see, what are you getting out of this experience? Like, what, when you go a step backwards and say, what are you required to do academically, right? You may be more research focused, you may be more presentation focused, you may be in a program that by its nature is more collaborative, so on and so forth. All right, you're seeing all of these different environments that translates professionally. So what does your major really mean, right? And I think the other piece for us that has been so helpful, and for a lot of for a longer period of time, I mean, this is my perception of the liberal arts from when I was looking in colleges back in '05 and '06, right? Was that liberal arts and sciences colleges want you to discover yourself, and then the path forward will become apparent, right? And Gettysburg long ago said no. Like, your academic development and your professional development need to happen concurrently. Um, they are not separate. And so by doing that, I think it puts students in a position where they're looking at things in a bigger picture all the time. In that, yes, you may enjoy this topic, but what that really is doing is it makes it easier for you to write the papers because it's something you enjoy, to do the research, to stand up and present, so on and so forth. But still, when you step back, someone is saying, look, the important thing is not that you did a project on X. The important thing out of this is that you've better established your writing voice, you've better established your public speaking, so on and so forth, so that you don't end up in a rut of, all right, I'm graduating, how do I do English, right? When I graduate, okay, how am I taking these skills and what fields best fit this?
That's great. And another way that we can think about the overall program is something Gettysburg is famous for, which is your honor code. And I think schools, sometimes you'll hear the phrase honor code kicking around, and for a high school junior, that might just be such a foreign concept that it doesn't even necessarily resonate what that is and how that influences your program. When a school talks about an honor code, could you break that down for us? What does honor code kind of mean?
So the tiers of it, you know, every school's got some sort of academic integrity policy, right? Plagiarize a paper, cheat on a test, these are the ramifications, right? The big difference that is most similar between all the different, I think it's less than 20. And if you look at the number of institutions that have an honor code being less than 20, also taking into consideration in that number West Point, Annapolis, Air Force Academy, Coast Guard Academy, Merchant Marine, like the service institutions, right? It's not that huge a number. The big shift is, at the end of the day, who's culpable, right? So with an honor code, it's your peers. It's not just a matter of you. It's not just a matter of you stepping back and saying, all right, this is me and the professor. It is you and your peers around you. And I think having that accountability also helps the collaborative, not competitive overall nature of campus. But you know, that hallmark is often not just the academic ramifications, right? It's very much a culture of campus ramification as well. Some places go whole hog. Gettysburg is a place where you go into, to go back to the dining hall, you go into the dining hall at lunch hour, you know, right with the first wave of people, you're going to notice something weird. Everyone's in line and all their stuff is sitting on the table where they want to sit. Cell phones, wallets, backpacks, purses, what have you. That's just, you put your stuff down so you have your seat, you go get your food, you come back, it's not gone, right? Or there'll be students that have gone to their meal and you go into the library and you see laptops and backpacks and everything just at the tables. They just, like they were home, they just stood up and went to another room of the house to eat, right? So you can find those things that will bleed into the campus environment depending on the level of engagement. As far as, you know, is this something that is just it's just people see it as something that's academic, or is it something that people see as broader? I will, my one quick plug for you guys at Catholic Memorial. I mean, some of it's because you know, Jaden Woodard was like going down the road with us for a while there. Mm-hmm. And you know, that's a sort of example. Like, it's funny, I will tell this story, and like, you guys, like at Catholics, you should tell this story all the time. I'm interviewing a Catholic Memorial student, as most of us do. We, you know, set up these interviews in the lobbies of the hotels we're staying in on the weekends or nights or whatever. And I'm sitting there and this, you know, interviewing this student, and an older fellow with his wife is having a huge coughing jag. And the student stops what he's saying, and he's asked this guy if he's okay. And then he determines that this guy's actually a World War II vet that's like in town to meet with some of his old buddies. And he said, by the way, sir, I want to say thank you. And then he comes back to me at the interview, and it's like, all right, kid, I don't know if you understand what the honor code is, but like, you're probably in the best position to live it. Because if that's your experience coming from high school, then you're just going to dive in and you're going to find it's sometimes that, oh my gosh, I found my peers in a week, mm-hmm. instead of, you know, taking the semester to find your feet of your social circle.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I love that story as well. I mean, it makes CM look pretty good, so I'll always take it. And I think, you know, honor code is the one thing that we're talking about right now, but as you're doing this college research, you might find schools that are talking about a specific thing that they keep on coming back to, in the same way Gettysburg keeps on coming back to. And when you see that nugget, you want to pull on that thread and find out what you can find out about, okay, well, how do they then live this, and how is that ingrained in their culture? And if it's something that they keep on talking about in the materials that they're sharing, there's probably a reason for that I kind of want to make sure that I'm defining those words and I understand what that means for the culture of a campus, and how I could pursue what I want to do there. And, you know, maybe moving a little bit from the intangible to a more tangible thing about the way schools might run. You know, sometimes on websites or research materials, you'll see the differences about courses that might be taught by professors or faculty-student ratios. Tell me a little bit, like, what's the difference between a class that's taught by a professor and a class that's taught by a TA, or how those faculty-to-student ratios might might be doctored a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I've got to do my Gettysburg due diligence and just say at Gettysburg College there are no courses taught by TAs.
Right.
Also, a hallmark of small liberal arts colleges is oftentimes, because there's no grad students, there are no classes taught by TAs. We definitely have, like, our business program is they're famous for hiring people who have an MBA and 20 years of experience. And so it's that professor of practice, but it's a whole different rabbit hole. So this is the important thing, right? Is like identifying what a school means, because sometimes what a course taught by TA is a lecture course of 150 students or more that breaks down once a week into a discussion section. And so you're interacting with that teaching assistant. And so depending on your style as a student, that teaching assistant is who you interact with much more than the professor themselves. But on paper, that course overall is actually taught to you by a faculty member. You're just in that classroom with however many other students. So your engagement with the faculty is more dependent on your own initiative. So I think that's one of the first things in the doctored sense, that it's got to be that tandem, right? It's got to be, I feel like this college search process is all about tandem numbers, right? What's your student to faculty ratio? What's your average class size? All right. So you look at a big place that, like, oh, our student to faculty ratio is like 13-1. Okay.
It's always 13-1.
What's that?
I said it's always 13-1. That seems like the magic number.
Isn't that? Or you become a liberal arts college and you get to the point, and Gettysburg is this way as well, that you finally hire enough faculty that you're 9.3, and so it can be 9-1. And then everyone gets wicked excited. Less than 10. But okay, so look, so Gettysburg, 9-1, average class size 16. All right, that sounds about right. Okay, look at a large place that may be 13-1. What's your average class size? 28. Okay. How big does a class, or when you subdivide a large class, so I guess it's a triplicate number. When you subdivide a large class, how big are the discussion sections? Well, they're 25. So your discussion sections are actually counting probably in that number that's dragging your average class size down, but there's nothing in there that is actually telling you overall what percentage of classes are taught by faculty. A liberal arts and sciences college is going to stand on the mount with the Trump and say, you know, this is how many faculty have terminal degrees, you know, and what percentage of them are, you know, teaching not only teaching classes, teaching first-year classes, right? And all these different things that they'll just give you all this information. And that can be sometimes with a larger institution. You got to dig for that info a little bit and figure out what's going on. The other 10 number, this is my soapbox. This is, I could be wearing any school's colors and be talking from experience. When someone says they're test optional, the next question you got to ask is what percentage of the incoming class is test optional. Those two tandem numbers are wicked important, because any place that's like, oh yeah, we're test optional, what percentage of the incoming class is test optional? 5%, means apply test optional, go in a different pile. Once they've got the class, they're going to be like, all right, let's look through these test optional kids and see what's going on. Or you look at a place like Gettysburg, we're test optional, 35% of the incoming class is coming in test optional. You know, okay, what is it? So numbers, right? The important thing is all the numbers. It's like, I've got the one, but I need the one or two more to really be able to get a grasp of the situation.
Well, and I really appreciate that, because that's giving some of the questions to our guys that when they're meeting with some of the admissions reps, you know, sometimes people say we're test optional. It's like, oh, you know, are you really test optional? And the answer to that is, yeah, we're absolutely test optional. Sometimes the question can also be, you know, well, what are the average test scores for the people who submit, you know, and just try to decipher that. And then, you know, yes, send the scores, or no, don't send the scores. That, you know, numbers are numbers. there are some numbers that we can look at and say this is a softer number or this is a harder number in terms of the class size. And you might be a person who is interested in being in a lecture hall with 150 people and you're okay with working with TAs. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to find that fit. But if you're looking at, a large state school that's an R1 university that plays D1 sports, and you're saying, well, that faculty to student ratio is very similar to, or class size ratio is very similar to a much smaller school, pull that apart a little bit, ask why and what's sort of underlying that number. And yeah.
Well, one thing, jump in, Jack. This is my favorite that I tell everyone. I graduated with 53 kids in my senior class in Northern New York. 3 of us were cousins. I mean, it's just that rural America, right?
Uh-huh.
My first lecture class, which was actually my first class in college, was a lecture with more students in that class than in the entire building that was actually 7 through 12. That was my junior, senior high school that I graduated from. And so it was like, okay, now I had the mind of like, this is probably what college is.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like shocking or startling, but it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
here's where we are.
I love, that, and something that everybody has in front of them, at least for our juniors right now, that first college class that you take really like sticks with. In the first college class I ever took, it was like a classroom of 25 people. Someone just got up to go to the bathroom and didn't raise their hand or ask first. And I was like, where am I? What is, there are no rules here. We just got a question in the chat box that, as we're talking about test optional, does it hurt if you go test optional, does that hurt a student as they're looking for merit money?
Again, what's the school? Go to Gettysburg College's merit page, merit scholarship page. We changed the language so it says all students are considered for a merit scholarship regardless of if they submit a test score. Because if you've been test optional, at some point someone should have had the thought, or should have the logic was saying, we do not believe that these test scores are the best indicators of 4-year college success. All right. So if you're saying that, then what is the indicator? And that's what you give merit money based off of. If you're truly saying, I don't believe that these aren't a good indicator. Again, how forthright, and like we were guilty. We were totally doing this internally, right? We were saying down our top scholarship, I'm going to surprise everyone. Well, actually, it changed now. We have, due to the Presidential Institute, we now have an Eisenhower scholarship. That one's more geared just to like public policy interested students. But formerly, the top prize was the Abraham Lincoln Prize. Like I said, should surprise no one, right? But we definitely, in our minds, have a concept of like, this is a curriculum worthy of that, accolade, or this is some activity that you've done. You know what I mean? That you don't just bump into this. This is a expression of your character, or all the other things we talk about, right? Character, grit, determination, drive, what have you.
And I think what is interesting, and there was another question that in the chat about, I do think that the trend is more schools are going to go test optional as we go through the summer. And what Alex is kind of discussing right now that I think we should have in mind as we're doing that research is, okay, for those schools that have moved test optional in the last 6 months, trying to like ask them the questions of why. Why are you going test optional? Is it because you have to go test optional right now? Is it we're going test optional to widen the door a little bit for admissions, but maybe the financial aid piece hasn't moved? Financial aid offices students usually like looking at the admissions website. Parents might want to go to the financial aid website and really learn what language that they use there. And has that office moved in step with the admissions office in terms of the way that they look at awarding merit money based on scholarships, or has that office not moved? So do you want to add anything to that, Alex? Or
yeah, no, It's a snarl, man.
It is.
We
That's very
are.
diplomatic.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes.
You know, so there was a big change. Here's the funny thing, Jack, that I keep coming back to. I remember when everyone was like, what does it mean when NACAC is changing and da 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 da? Like, what's this going to be? And it was just like the universe is like, you want to learn how to cope. We show you how to cope. And so, I mean, I think one of these pieces is it's going to be a ton of it.
Mhm.
You know, I cannot, as I'm thinking about these processes, you know, police is going test optional. The question we're getting asked in our information sessions, what is your review process going to look like? Well, for us, fortunately, we're looking at your transcript. So it's going to take more time to just be like, did the school go pass fail? What did they do for a grading scale? What did they do? You know, some schools will like, look, guys, we know you're signed up for an AP test. We don't believe you can be successful. So we're going to recommend no one takes an AP test, versus a school that's like, yup, they're changing it, all head full. We've got to look at this. My piece that I'm going to be interested in is, what's that mean for application review? How long does it take? How do people change their metrics of things? So I think that's going to be one of the pieces. There are certain schools that are positioned to be successful because it's like, hey, add another step. What was the COVID-19 academic response, right? There are some places that, you know, they're going to have to change the entire way they do application review if they're going to still look at you with a straight face and say, it's a holistic application review process.
Mhm. Yep. I appreciate that. And maybe pulling it back a little bit to the, what am I good at, and finding my fit and doing that. And as we're talking about online learning right now, and again, I am very proud of the way that CM has responded, and that we're one of those schools that has said, we're going to adapt and we're going to pivot and we're going to change. And I think this has been a challenging time for our students and our faculty and our families and everyone, but it's also been a time of growth that has probably been a little, growth is uncomfortable at times. As we're thinking about that next step, what might students be learning about their learning styles right now, or preferences that they could then apply to that college search of the what am I good at and how do I learn?
Right. So I mean, maybe this is the great petri dish, or the crucible, whatever scientific instrument you want to use. I honestly hadn't thought that way. I think in in a larger sense, it teaches you where you are with independent learning,
Mm-hmm.
which again, that can go to a big, small, someone's giving you information. And I mean, hearing it virtually in many cases is not that different from sitting in a lecture hall. The level of engagement is based on faculty ability. Well, look, through Zoom, the level of engagement is based on faculty ability. So do you want to be at a place that really, the onus is on you? You sit in a lecture, what percentage of your classes are lecture style versus seminar style, so on and so forth. And also really, especially for these students, what's that mean for my first year, right? Because there are places that, yeah, you have lectures, but it's your first year or your first couple years. And then if you there's no reason I took a lecture class, but I wanted to take Archaeology Goes to the Movies because I got to take a quiz on Indiana Jones. Shoot me. That's my hobby. So it's one of these things that can teach you the shift of how am I doing on my own can teach you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest. I was talking with my mother. Mother's Day. I was a good boy. But I was talking with my mom, and I'm like, I don't know if I could have hacked it. I'm like, granted, what did virtual technology look like when I was in high school versus now? And it would have been totally different.
Mm-hmm.
But like, this just isn't my learning style. You know, I had to be in a situation where I could be like sitting and discussing and so on and so forth. You know, that was always going to be my environment where I learned the best. Thank God I'm 6'7", and so like most of the lecture halls, the leg room is awful, and so you got to sit in the front row in order to be comfortable, which means you're going to be the ones that's answering questions, so it at least ups your engagement in some degree. But I think that's going to be important, and also, right, the big paradigm I discuss with high school students, and it depends on their high school. I mean, and sometimes even their faculty and their own style. But this idea often is you do homework to reinforce what you learned in class. And then the big paradigm shift in college is that you're doing homework to prepare for what class is going to be the next day. And so like, where do you fall on that spectrum? Like going through this, are you finding that like working through the assignments after the discussion, or are you at the point that you're comfortable like, hey, this is where this is going, I'm going to follow it through.
Mm-hmm.
And just know yourself of not even just what is it with fit, like what am I going, well, maybe it's fit, what am I going to need in order to find an environment that I can be successful.
Mm-hmm. And you know, we've sort of got one last question that we've got prepared. After that, if you have a question you want to add to the, you know, the chat box, or if you want to raise your hand, by all means, like it could be something related to fit, it could be just something about college admissions in general, that Alex could be helpful with. The last question we're talking about, especially as our juniors are working on that discernment paper, one of the questions they're really wrestling with, and it's a complicated question, is how can I be of service to others, and how can I take the gifts that I have and then put that into something that'll make the world a better place. What programs might a college offer that then could be aligned to that question of how do I put myself into service?
Yeah. You know, it's, in some ways it can just be the lightning rod of an office, right? Ours is called the Center for Public Service. You know, there may be a office of community engagement, there may be, but like looking at those offices, right? Again, looking at how many students actually participate, right? Maybe even, you know, a step further, okay, I look in this office and I go to the office's website, how many people who work in the office are staff, and how many people who work in the office are student employees.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so therefore, is it driven by the college, you know, and sort of saying, hey, these are community relationships we've built over the years, and they always love to have college students involved? Or is it students saying, hey, based on XYZ interest, academically, personally, what happens, we've got this opportunity to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, again, you know, some of that, it's going to be asking about the culture of the place. You know, the campus culture question I get asked all the time, what percentage of students are involved in Greek life? That's the one I get asked all the time. It's like, okay, that's fine. I can give you that number. Why don't you ask me what percentage of students are involved in community service projects?
Mm-hmm.
What about asking me, what's the largest campus community organization? You know, you may learn different things. I mean, Gettysburg College is historically a Lutheran institution, although that now has much more implications on the pedagogy and sort of that equality to access of education and so on and so forth. The largest student organization that's like community engaging is the Newman Association, the Catholic Student Association. This is the largest, you know, at a Lutheran school. So, you know, it's probably Maryland, to be blunt. We do have a high percentage of students coming from Maryland and what have you, and there are plenty of students that come from New England. But yeah, you know, ask what those organizations are, or like, you know, get the tour guide, and even now I can tell you, because I've been figuring out how this is going to work technologically. We have like virtual, I was not in the meeting to decide what they're named. I think we're calling them virtual ambassadors. Basically students who otherwise would have been on campus this summer being tour guides, and instead are doing like Zoom chats for students, virtual tours for some of the students who are in the area, more local to campus where they live, so on and so forth. I know Friday, for better or worse, we're going to code yellow, status yellow. Things are starting to open up. I will, if I could throw one thing on, and look, I love New England. Like, I hope everyone knows, like, the Catholic Memorial folks have been seeing me for like 6-7 years. Like, I've been doing New England recruiting. My mom's a native Mainer. I love New England. I also have a New England mother, and so I know how determined parents can be. We got a phone call last Thursday from the dining hall, which is physically an open space. It is not locked. And they're like, we had four families of prospective students who visited today, and we gave them a tour of the dining hall. And it's like, was that legal? Like, I mean, this is the nature of a small liberal arts college, is we're just going to open the doors and say, yeah, come on in. Although it's funny because when I drove past campus this weekend, there's a statue of Eisenhower. He was on the board of trustees, and the admissions office was the building he used for in-town offices. Statue of Eisenhower. He's got a mask on. I don't know who put it there. And then there's a more famous statue of Lincoln signing the Emancipation Proclamation, and his ears are covered by his hair, so they actually tied a mask on the back of him. But even the statues are practicing and hygiene. But like, when you go to these places, like, what are students doing in the community? Like, what are the ideas? Like, what are, my one shtick, because everyone's got some shtick. You're going to go around places and like, they're going to talk about they have a Quidditch team or something. Everyone wants to like meet you with their like self-deprecating humor. Here's my self-deprecating humor. Parents, if you have gardens at home and it's been a struggle the whole time raising your children, trying to get them to weed or rock a garden, we have a community garden called the Painted Turtle Farm. And they're on average 300 students who volunteer at least 70 hours a semester tending to those gardens. So send them to the college, we'll give them a green thumb and send them right back to you for the same. I mean, it's like weird stuff like that. Like, okay, go find that sort of thing. And, what are students doing? I mean, you've got some projects in New England that just having those students, we have students come to campus and it's like, what are you guys doing now? And you can see our current students talking with them, and they're like, oh man, yeah, we got to start that up here. So go find those places, go find those students and find their level of engagement. And also know that like, that may just be the slice of campus that you are most attached to.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great spot to end sort of the prepared version, where those slices of campus, you want to look for those, that as you're doing your research, if one thing kind of just lights a little spark in you, keep on pulling on that spark or keep on pulling on that thread and say, okay, that might be where I find my fit. Is this one thing that just, maybe it's Quidditch, and maybe it is, hey, you know what, I've got the opportunity to be in a garden, or it just sounds interesting that at this school, literally the entire campus engages in service and then celebrates together afterwards. There are a lot of ways to find that unique thing that just sounds like, okay, I haven't heard something like this before, and that's the thing that I'm looking for. We're going to open it up right now. If you want to raise your hand to ask a question audibly, or if you want to put something in the chat box, we've got about 10 minutes left, but by all means, if you have other questions about college admissions or Gettysburg in particular, Alex and I and Ms. Kaplan and Mr. Claiborne would be happy to help you. I always feel like there's a delay in this moment while someone's typing and I'm retyping. Oh, here we go. Do you have a Army ROTC program, or what does ROTC look like at Gettysburg?
Yeah. Man, would that not be wicked weird to be like the college known for being in a battlefield and not having an ROTC program. Yes, we do. We're actually blessed. We have the green space. So the battalion is the cadre for the ROTC, that was it, Blue Mountains Battalion, is up in Carlisle because the Army War College, of course. But that is awesome. That's up there. The students get a lot of opportunity to interact with those individuals. But when they're doing their exercises, they're doing PT, whatever, they're typically down on the battlefield or, some of the green spaces. We have one of those high ropes courses, and a bunch of other stuff that we get to use the facilities. It's sort of a cool place to be for ROTC, because we do have the Eisenhower Institute of Leadership and Public Policy. And so inherently, a lot of those seminars that they do and the panels that they bring to campus are just more about the leadership, like Ike as a leader instead of Ike as a politician, because he's really sort of late bloomer in the politics game. So we're able to leverage that, and a lot of other proximities to go through. I think the cadre right now at the college, I think it's 50 plus. I may be a little bit low on that. But it's usually 12 to 15 students per academic year, with more in first and second year, right? Because there are non-contract ROT students who are trying to pick up contract. And so there'll be bigger numbers in your first year and your sophomore years. But yeah, you have a program.
Well, and what I love about Gettysburg too, I mean, if you want to talk about having a tangible experience with military history, like the amount of, don't they do like war games on the battlefields or reenactments?
Yeah, we actually, there's a meeting with the superintendent of the battlefield and a bunch of other guys. We're supposed to be doing a big program in late August. And so because it's late August, we don't know. We didn't know anything. But actually, one of the cooler things is when they built one of the football fields, in order to promote drainage, they actually rebuilt this small line of trenches that was constructed at some point during the battle. They just kind of dug the earth back out. So we actually have a faculty member who was on the World War I Centennial Commission. And he actually takes students out there to talk about trench warfare, where it's, a different war, but in some ways a trench is a trench. So it's kind of a cool, the environment around you is your classroom. That's really cool. As well as just like, hey, I don't want to be in a building. I want to go on green space, like walk past the lacrosse field and you're on the battlefield, with roads and what that you can be around.
All right, and so one of the big questions that we're facing, and I think definitely a point of anxiety, coming back to that test optional question, if students are only able to take the SAT once, it suggests that scores be submitted to test optional if possible. Will that be taken into consideration, taking the test once compared to an average of 2 to 3 times? If you were to envision yourself in a school that had placed a higher emphasis on test scores, how, and understanding that this is a hypothetical and a little bit of projection, how would you evaluate those test scores knowing that maybe someone can only take the test one time?
I think in that situation, again, it goes back to, are you using it as an indicator or are you not using it as an indicator of collegiate success? So if you are using it as an indicator, then what you're standing back and saying, look, this is the situation for almost everyone, right? That they're probably only taking these tests once. Or, maybe they were able to squeak out taking the SAT and the ACT, but not taking each multiple times. So in that regard, I just think they're just going to change the benchmark. If they're still wanting the test scores, there will have to be some recognition, but also too, in this environment, what does it mean when that's the same for everyone? So I think it's going back to, because that whole thesis for a review process is that, well, everyone takes the same test And so your success, it's a universal indicator of who you are compared to everyone else in your pool. Then you're just going to also say, all right, but they took it once, but everyone's taken it once. So what does that mean? And step back and look at it in that regard.
Yeah. It's in a moment of national and even international adaptability and flexibility. What I keep on feeling is there's going to have to be a little bit of give, like that the test scores are not going to be the same this year compared to any other year because students are only taking it once, or because they're taking it once and the testing environment has changed from what it has been in the past. So I really wish that everyone had a little bit more clarity on that, and it's something that's almost impossible to provide because we know people will adapt. We haven't really figured out how yet.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think we're in a position where had things gone differently with NACAC, ...
Yeah.
that might be
Mhm.
someone and almost bring that edict from on high to say, look, this is a good standard that we all agree is the way we can do things.
Mhm. Absolutely. We probably have time for one last question. If there's anything else about admissions or fit or Gettysburg, I will do a plug right now. Alex is coming back at 1 o'clock today to do a rep visit. So if you're interested in that, that link can be found in SCORE, or if you want to email me, I'll send you the direct link so you can hear a little bit more about Gettysburg in a small group. Any other questions? All right. Alex, thank you so much for joining. Oh yeah, by all means.
Okay, it's no questions. I just want to make one shameless plug, this is no statement on anyone for any reason, but just I think this is something that's going to be important to consider. And one of the great things you can do right now as parents helping your students, think about what those essays are going to be. I'm here to argue that it doesn't have to not be. I think I used a double negative there. What I'm trying to say is it's okay to write an essay that has a COVID-19 theme. But the importance is really keeping that impact on the student, right? We've been talking, and this is before my time as an admissions professional, but we've been talking with folks about the prior framework for many people, most people, was 9/11 because of its broad impact on almost everyone. There was an impact to the way you lived your life, right? And that's what we're experiencing here. So, I always tell parents, I think it's important as you're looking at these, there's going to be even more stress this year, self-imposed or otherwise, for like, what am I making my essay about? But realistically, it's okay to sort of keep that same idea of, look, you're writing about you and how you get over things and how you succeed. And so if that's the direction to go, that's a fine direction to go. And also too, if you want to be the student that writes about Legos, I feel like Legos is like the go-to in the quiver of an admissions professional, to just be like, oh yeah, we've seen a funny essay. What was it about? Legos. But it really, it's really going to be okay. I think, this is my hypothesis, I think that essay won't have more weight per se as far as an overall admission decision, but I think overall that essay will be read with greater interest than it was previously. Like I said, it's not that someone's going to, for the first time, read and be like, oh man, look at this essay. We're not going to admit this kid. I've only ever read one essay that really made me question my admission decision, and it was the prompt the student chose was talk about how you overcome some difficult experience in life. And the student's answer was, actually, things have been pretty good for me in life. Thank you. Period. And I was like, what? I mean, it's sort of like answering the psychology paper. Why? Why not? You know, but that one was a bit of a, okay, I think I need to call this student and
Swing and a miss.
But
yeah. Well, Alex, thank you so much. That's great advice to end.